Welcome to Wicked Tales Unfold, where fear takes form and the unknown becomes reality. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now, without wasting any more time, let's begin with the story. The Ritual. In the heart of a thick forest, tangled with vines and whispering secrets, a group of 5 friends, Ella, Max, Sarah, Liam, and Jonas, were restless with curiosity. They had come to the woods for a weekend getaway, but the lingering tales of the ancient ritual site, said to be hidden deep within, filled their minds with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As dusk set in, they gathered around the campfire, a flickering glow pushing back the encroaching shadows. The flames crackled as Max regaled them with stories of the site, a long-lost altar, said to be a place of worship for a forgotten deity. He described the intricate stone carvings and the eerie atmosphere that surrounded it, tales passed down from locals warning of the dangers that lay within the woods. The elders say if you disturb the site, you unleash a powerful force, Max warned, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Oh come on, Ella laughed, always the skeptic. It's just a bunch of old stones. We have to check it out. After much discussion, the group decided they would explore the ancient site the next day. As they trudged through the underbrush, a sense of exhilaration gripped them. The trees loomed overhead, their branches forming a natural cathedral, while leaves whispered secrets only the forest knew. Finally, they stumbled upon the clearing. Standing at the center was a circular platform of moss-covered stones, etched with strange symbols and surrounded by towering trees that seemed to lean in, as if listening. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, making every rustle sound like a warning. "This is amazing," Jonas murmured, kneeling to get a closer look at the carvings. The others gathered around, equally entranced. But as Max traced his fingers over the stones, a low rumble echoed through the ground, sending a chill up their spines. "What was that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Max shrugged it off, but unease settled in the pit of their stomachs. Undeterred, they decided to leave their mark on the site, a gesture to pay homage. Or so they thought. Each friend placed a token of their own on the stones. Ella's charm bracelet, Liam's old compass, Sarah's writing journal, Max's lucky coin, and Jonas's small knife. As they backed away, the rumble grew into a cacophony, wind swirling around them. The stones pulsated with an otherworldly light, silhouettes of figures dancing beneath the surface, and then, darkness consumed them. When the light dimmed, so did their laughter. They hurried back to their campsite, excitement replaced by nervous energy. But something was wrong. The air felt heavier, charged with dread. That night, Sarah was the first to notice it. Faint whispers called to her from the depths of the woods, too soft to discern. She dismissed it as her imagination, but when she glanced at her friends, each was wrapped in sleep, unaware of the encroaching danger. In the early hours of the morning, a piercing scream shattered the tranquility. They rushed from their tents, hearts pounding, only to find Jonas missing. Panic seized the group, and they fanned out, voices echoing as they called for him among the trees. Bordering on despair, they stumbled upon Jonas's body lying unnaturally still at the altar, his face pale and twisted in fear. No signs of a struggle, just an overwhelming sense of loss. As the reality sank in, their breaths quickened. A malevolent force had indeed been awakened. "We need to get out of here," Liam urged, his voice trembling. But as they turned to leave, a rustling caught their attention. Max, appearing suddenly behind them with wild eyes, shouted, "We have to go back. We angered it, we must appease it." In their confusion, they split into 2 groups. Ella, Max, and Liam ran north, while Sarah and Jonas's lighter forms turned back to the altar, desperate to find a way to undo what had been done. As the night deepened, shadows shifted around them, and one by one, the forest claimed its innocent victims. Ella screamed as she was dragged into the darkness, her pleas swallowed by the void. Max was snatched next. His frantic gasps tormented the air as he, too, disappeared. Only Sarah and Liam remained, huddled together, understanding that they had sinned against an ancient power they didn't comprehend. They returned to the altar, desperation pushing them forward. "Please," Liam cried, collapsing to his knees, "we're sorry, we didn't mean to disturb anything." The air thickened around them, and the stones glowed ominously. Shadows gathered, swirling and coalescing into a figure formed of darkness and despair. A grotesque visage of wrath. Sacrifice. The word resonated through the clearing, chilling them to the core. With hearts pounding, they understood. They had to offer something truly worthy to appease the force, each other. In a moment of courage, Sarah stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "You can take me," she said, "but let him go." Liam screamed in protest but couldn't reach her. The shadows converged, pulling Sarah into their eternal embrace. The last sound she made was a whisper, a single word: "Run." Liam fled, the weight of their sorrow and mistakes crashing down upon him. He stumbled through the thicket, branches tearing at his skin as he ran blindly back to their campsite. He collapsed among the ashes of their fire, panting and broken. The shadows faded, but the whispers lingered, echoing in his mind, a reminder of the cost of curiosity. As dawn broke over the forest, Liam sat silently, the realization settling in: the woods around him eternally change. He was the last, left only to remember the laughter of friends once vibrant but now silenced by the horror of the unknown. The ancient ritual site, now untouched and waiting, remained a dark testament to their folly, a place where shadows danced, and echoes of the lost lingered forevermore. Let's get to another story: The Last Visitor. The crisp autumn air wafted through the windows of Evergreen Pines, a hospice nestled on the outskirts of town. Its walls were lined with portraits of serene landscapes, and the gentle hum of a distant piano floated in the background. For Clara, a dedicated night nurse, this place held both beauty and sorrow. Each patient had a story that filled her heart, but one detail sparked a thread of unease. It began with Mr. Wilson, a charming elderly man with a carefree laugh that belied the frailty of his body. During her evening rounds, he had spoken softly of a visitor who appeared to him in dreams. A woman with flowing hair and a kind smile. "You wouldn't believe it," he chuckled. "She says she's come to take me dancing one last time." Clara smiled, albeit with a hint of apprehension, but 2 nights later, he was gone. A subtle breath exhaled, and silence filled the room. Weeks passed, and Clara's joy in nursing began to wane as more patients spoke of similar visitors. There was Mrs. Thompson, who spoke of her late son, a bright boy who met her at the foot of her bed, assuring her that he was waiting. The day after she smiled through her tears, she slipped away, a fragile wrinkled hand resting peacefully against the sheets. The pattern grew too pronounced to ignore, the mysterious figures arriving to whisk them away, all while Clara remained vigilant, the lone witness to their goodbyes. At first, Clara sought solace in the idea that these visitations brought comfort, but doubt crept in as an unsettling feeling coiled in her stomach. One night, Clara found herself checking on Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson's husband, who had been doing poorly since his wife's passing. As she tended to him, his eyes fluttered open, and he gazed past her, his frail voice barely audible. "She's here," he whispered, a smile breaking on his face. Clara's breath caught in her throat, but she swallowed her dread as concern bloomed in her chest. "Who is here, Mr. Thompson?" "Mary," he replied, melting into a dream-like state. "She's finally come." His voice trailed off, replaced by a serene expression. Clara stepped back, her heart hammering, as she noticed the familiar surroundings around Mr. Thompson fade. The framed pictures on his bedside became mere shadows. She left the room, her pulse racing, and within hours, he too departed, slipping quietly into the night. With each passing week, her colleagues joked about the effect of these last visitors, calling them angels. But Clara felt the noose of dark anticipation tighten around her throat. Was it merely coincidence, or was there something more sinister at play? The fear of what was to come gnawed at her, and as she gathered notes and charts on yet another patient, she realized a chilling truth. She had become the sole constant in their departures. One evening, while nursing a pot of tea, Clara stared into the steaming liquid, where her own reflection warped in the undulating surface. Then, an urgent thought pierced her mind. When would she receive her own visitor? It wasn't just patients talking anymore. Now, she felt their eyes on her, their whispers brush against her ears. She opened her notebook, restless, jotting down notes frantically about her concerns. The death rate was skyrocketing in Evergreen Pines, and yet nobody took her seriously. The next night, as she wandered through the quiet corridors, lingering too long over her thoughts, Clara felt the air grow dense around her. Shadows lengthened across the walls, flickering like candles in a restless wind. She paused by a room with the door slightly ajar and heard something strange, a soft music box playing, the melody eerily sweet. Drawn inside, she froze as she spied a shadowy figure at the window, silhouetted against the dim light of the street lamps outside. Clara's heart raced. It couldn't be. She didn't know this woman, with long flowing hair, draped in a gown that looked like it belonged to another time. The specter turned, meeting Clara's gaze with sorrowful eyes that shimmered like morning dew. "Help me," the figure whispered, and Clara instinctively reached out. Her fingers brushed against the cool air, the moment stretching, time suspended. The figure, a visage of every patient Clara had cared for, morphed into familiar faces. "You can't escape the fate they have ushered in," the figure mourned. Clara stumbled backward, realizing the visitors were not just figments but manifestations of something deeper and darker. They were beckoning her to join them, to cross the threshold into the unknown. She fled, heart pounding like a war drum, racing through the halls that began to swirl around her. But as she reached for the exit, a voice echoed behind her. "You've been chosen, Clara." It was a whisper so haunting she felt it claw at her mind. In that moment, the realization struck. She was not merely a witness. She was part of this tapestry woven tightly with threads of life and death. The night wore on with an ethereal tension that left her skin crawling. She evaded sleep, her eyes wide and vigilant, until the dawn light peeked through the windows, banishing shadows. Days turned to weeks, and Clara found herself grappling with the permanence of her existence. The faces continued to visit, warning her, guiding her, and in those fleeting moments, she felt the balance of her own fate hanging delicately in the air. Finally, she had to confront it. The night came again, and with it, a calm resolve. As she walked into the dim room of her most recent patient, the shadows danced, and the visitors gathered. This time, she would not flinch. Drawing in a deep breath, Clara faced the specter before her as other patients' figures hovered nearby. "I won't let you take me," she declared, her voice firm as she recognized the faces of those she cared for, those who needed her light. "My life is my own." The air crackled with tension, the shadows recoiling as she took steps forward. "I'm here to help, to hold the light for you," she said, embodying the warmth of compassion they once knew. The spectral arms softened and enveloped her with resonance, and just as quickly, they faded, leaving an unheard promise in the silence. From that night onward, Clara became the protector of the dying and a guardian of the bond between life and the afterlife. With each farewell, she honored their memories, refusing to be another soul claimed by the shadows. Instead, she became the beacon, guiding the weary homeward, ensuring that the last visitors remained mere whispers in the night, a lullaby of hope, rather than harbingers of despair. Let's get to another story. The old bookstore. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and leather bindings as Alara pushed open the heavy oak door of Whispers of the Past, a quaint bookstore tucked away on a quiet street of her small town. Sunlight filtered through the grimy windows, casting hazy beams across the labyrinth of towering bookshelves. Dust motes danced in the light, and the faint sound of the bell above the door chimed a welcome as she stepped inside. Alara was a bibliophile, a lover of books who thrived on the stories woven within their pages. This bookstore was her sanctuary, a place where time dissolved and reality blurred. With every visit, she found solace among the well-thumbed novels and hidden literary treasures. Today, however, she felt an unusual pull, an inexplicable urge to wander deeper into the musty corners of the shop. Navigating past shelves overflowing with mind-bending mysteries and sweeping romances, she noticed a narrow passageway at the back, partially concealed by stacked boxes and neglected tomes. Intrigued, Alara squeezed her way through the makeshift labyrinth, brushing away cobwebs that had claimed the forgotten space. As she stepped into the dimly lit alcove, her eyes fell upon a solitary book that seemed to glow with an eerie allure. It was small, bound in cracked black leather, its spine adorned with intricate silver filigree, and stamped with a title that sent shivers down her spine: Fates Unwritten. Curiosity overcoming apprehension, she reached out and carefully extracted the book from the shelf. A cloud of dust erupted around her as she opened the cover, revealing pages yellowed with age, filled with beautiful, elegant script that danced across each line. Though the words were like whispers, they sang with a haunting melody, drawing her deeper into the text. As she read, Alara discovered that each story contained a prophetic glimpse into the lives of people who had come before her, unfortunate souls whose fates had been meticulously laid bare within the pages. The events foretold were specific and bleak: heartbreaks, betrayals, and tragic accidents unfolded in chilling detail, mapped out as if the very fabric of reality was tethered to the words. The first tale described a woman who lost her cherished partner in a tragic car accident, the result of a shattered promise. Alara's heart raced, the weight of impending dread settling heavily upon her. Could this book truly have the power to predict the future? She flipped through the next few pages, each story more harrowing than the last. A child fell ill, a friendship crumbled under the weight of jealousy, a beloved pet vanished into thin air. Each story felt less like fiction and more like warnings, and yet the perverse beauty of the prose entranced her. Then, Alara hesitated at a particular chapter titled, The Sorrowful Year. The narrative began with a seemingly innocuous detail. A sudden job loss. Her breath caught in her throat, a flash of anxiety coursing through her. The words continued, illuminating a path of betrayal from a close friend, followed by a devastating breakup, and finally, a near-fatal experience on a hiking trip. Panic bubbled within her. The timeline matched her life unnervingly well. With trembling hands, she slammed the book shut, casting glances around the dimly lit alcove as though expecting the storekeeper to appear. The oppressive atmosphere pressed down on her, and she could feel the weight of the stories swirling around her like a living entity, choking her with the sorrow of their truths. "Are you all right?" A soft voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Alara turned to find the old storekeeper, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She had a knowing smile, as though she could sense the mass of emotions raging inside Alara. I found this book," Alara stammered, holding it out in offering. "It's terrifying. It seems to predict horrible events." The storekeeper's expression shifted to one of contemplation. "Ah, yes. That book has been here for a long time. It's said to show the fates of those who hold it. But remember, dear, the future isn't set in stone. It can be altered, rewritten by choices that we make." "But if it shows predictably tragic events," Alara's voice quivered with uncertainty. "The stories can certainly guide you, but they do not control you," the woman replied gently. "The power lies not in the predictions, but in your awareness of them." Alara considered this, realizing the weight of her own agency in her life. She could choose how to respond to the whispered warnings of the past. With newfound determination, she clutched the book to her chest. "I'll take it," Alara said finally, "but not for fear of my future. I want to learn how to steer my own course." The storekeeper's smile widened. "Then you have embraced the true power of a bibliophile, my dear. To find wisdom in every story, to navigate life as both reader and writer." With that, Alara left the dusty bookstore, the weight of the book a solid presence in her hands. She left behind the fear of what could come, ready instead to craft her own narrative, determined to shape her life into one of hope and resilience. And perhaps, she thought, the predicting stories would serve as a guide not to foretell doom, but as prompts to ignite her courage against the tides of fate. Let's get to another story. The Night Watcher. Lila had always yearned for a fresh start. After a tumultuous year of heartbreak and disappointment, she finally found her way to a quaint, old house on the outskirts of town. Nestled among weeping willows and surrounded by fields of wildflowers, it was perfect, a sanctuary from her past. The first few nights were peaceful. Lila immersed herself in her new home, painting the walls warm shades of almond and mint, filling the shelves with books she had collected over the years, and planting her beloved geraniums in the garden. However, as the days turned to weeks, a subtle discomfort crept into her happy sanctuary. It began with flickers at the edge of her vision, shadows flitting past the windows when she was alone in the dim light of dusk. She brushed them off as her imagination, an overactive mind playing tricks in her newfound solitude. But soon, an unmistakable pattern emerged. Every night, as the moon cast its silver glow over the land, Lila noticed a dark figure standing at the edge of the yard, just beyond the reach of her porch light. Initially, she thought it might be a trick of the light, or perhaps a tree branch swaying in the breeze. But as night fell and the wind whispered through the leaves, the figure remained, still as a statue, its presence unyielding and unsettling. The sensation grew heavier in her chest. Some nights, she would pull the curtains tight, hoping the darkness would swallow the figure whole. Yet, the shadows seeped through the fabric, thickening with every breath she took, filling her mind with dread. Determined to uncover the truth, Lila grew fearless, or perhaps reckless in her resolve. One particularly chilly evening, she decided to confront the shadow. Heart pounding, she stepped outside, the cold biting at her skin. The world was wrapped in twilight, and there it was. a dark silhouette beneath the ancient oak tree. Lila squinted, trying to make sense of its form. "Who are you?" she called, her voice vigorous yet trembling. The figure stirred, revealing a face dimly illuminated by the moonlight. As the chill of the night scuttled away, Lila gasped. It was a young girl, no older than 10, with wild, tangled hair and clothes that appeared threadbare and worn. Her wide, sorrowful eyes glistened with an unsettling mixture of fear and hope. "Please don't be afraid," the girl whispered, her voice little more than a breath carried by the wind. "I didn't mean to bother you, but I wanted to see your home. It reminds me of my old one." "What happened to your old home?" Lila asked, incredulity and compassion weaving through her tones. The girl took a step closer, her shadow deepening against the white pebbles of the path. "I used to live here, before." Her voice trailed off, and the heaviness of her unspoken words hung in the air like fog. "Before what?" Lila thought. A flutter of understanding dawned upon her. "You disappeared." The girl shook her head slowly, tears brightening her wide eyes. "No, I never left. I'm still here. I want to remember. I miss my room and the laughter. I miss feeling safe." Surprised by the weight of empathy that coursed through her, Lila felt the girl's lingering sadness resonate with her own loneliness. "You can share my home," she offered gently, a decision bubbling within her heart. "We can make it ours together." The girl's face brightened for a fleeting moment, and Lila felt warmth filling the space between them. As if sensing a bridge being built, the air around them shimmered, and for the first time, Lila realized the power of connection, even with one who had slipped through the seams of this world. Each night afterward, the girl returned, sitting on the porch steps, telling Lila stories of laughter and warmth from a time long gone. They painted together, baked cookies that tantalized the air with sweet aromas, and filled the nights with stories exchanged under the shimmering stars. Lila's fear had blossomed into genuine friendship, reminding her that love could transcend even the darkest shadows. As the months unfurled, Lila felt a subtle shift in the home's energy, an acceptance that had settled beneath the bones of the old house. The girl's figure became less shadow and more substance. Eventually, she grew brighter, more tangible, until one night, Lila woke to find her sitting at the foot of her bed, bathed in moonlight. "Thank you, Lila," she whispered, gratitude etched into her gentle smile. "You helped me remember what I lost. It's time for me to go." Lila's heart ached, understanding this was the final farewell she had awakened to. She reached out to the girl, fingers brushing the air, cherishing the memory of their bond. "You're not gone. You'll always be here with me." With that, the girl nodded, her form dissolving into a cascade of sparkling light. Lila watched as the glow slipped through the window, scattering like lost dreams into the night sky. In the days that followed, Lila felt a new energy embedded in her home, a sense of peace, of freedom, and of love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. No more shadows haunted her. Just the echoes of laughter that continued to linger in the corners of her heart, filling her spirit with warmth every time the moonlight graced her windows. Let's get to another story: the playground. Once upon a time, in the small town of Eldridge Hollow, there lived an adventurous young boy named Oliver. His days were filled with exploration, climbing trees, and wandering the fields that bordered the woods. But it was after sunset that the magic truly began to unfold. One misty evening, after a particularly exhausting game of hide and seek with friends, Oliver wandered a little farther than usual, deep into the dense woods. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow that illuminated his path. Just as he began to feel the chill of the autumn night creeping in, he stumbled upon a clearing he had never seen before. There, emerging from the shadows, was a playground that seemed to shimmer under the moonlight. The spiral slide sparkled like liquid silver, the swings swayed gently despite the stillness of the night, and the merry-go-round lurked, its paint chipped but its allure undeniable. But as he stepped closer, a shiver crawled up Oliver's spine. "Oliver," a soft voice whispered from the darkness, drawing him in. It was unmistakably his name, laced with an eerie sweetness. For a moment, he hesitated, heart pounding in his chest. But curiosity outweighed fear as he stepped further into the enchanted playground. The abandoned toys around him began to hum with life: ragged teddy bears, rusted trucks, dolls with glassy eyes. Each whispering his name, beckoning him to join their game. "Join us, Oliver," they chimed in haunting harmony, their voices weaving around him like tendrils of fog. Spurred by a mixture of intrigue and trepidation, Oliver approached the merry-go-round, its metal surface cold to the touch. "What is this place?" he asked aloud, eyes wide with wonder. The bear, the largest of the toys, answered with a guttural laugh. "It's a playground for the lost. A world where dreams and nightmares intermingle. Stay with us, and you shall never feel alone again." For a fleeting heartbeat, he wondered what it would be like to belong to something so strange yet fascinating. "But I have friends," Oliver protested, a stray thought filling his mind, images of laughter and daylight adventures. The toys huddled closer, their eyes glinting in the shadows. "Friends come and go, young one," the doll chimed, "but we can always be here for you in the dark." A pang of anxiety gripped Oliver as the wind howled through the trees, weaving dark secrets into the air. "I need to go home," he whispered, taking a step back. The toys fell silent, the atmosphere thickening with an unsettling stillness. Then, in unison, they began to chant, "Once you're ours, you'll never leave." Realizing the gravity of his situation, Oliver turned to flee, but a thin thread of mist snaked around his ankles, holding him captive. "Let me go," he shouted, panic rising like bile in his throat. "Stay and play, Oliver, forever." The toys lured with voices that clawed at his mind, filling the night with echoes of desperation. Just as despair threatened to swallow him, Oliver recalled the stories his grandmother once told him about bravery, to face fears and stand firm against the dark. Gathering every ounce of courage, he shouted, "I am not afraid of you. You'll never have me." With that declaration, the mist shrank back, releasing its grip. Oliver dashed for the edge of the clearing, the playground dissolving in chaotic whispers behind him. As he burst through the trees back into familiar territory, the moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating his path home. Breathless, he looked back only once, seeing the playground flicker like a mirage, slowly fading into the night. The air was silent, and the weight of the toy's presence lifted, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. From that night on, Oliver regarded the woods with a newfound respect. He no longer sought adventure in the darkness but treasured the warmth of daylight. And though he never saw the playground again, he often heard the whispers on the wind, a haunting reminder of the dark world that only emerged beneath the moon, waiting to draw in the lost. Ultimately, he learned that true magic lay not in escaping to another realm but in the heart of friendship and bravery found amidst the light. And each time he heard the whispers of the night, he remembered to stand firm. A small boy, with a heart much bigger than the shadows that dared to claim him. Let's get to another story title, The Locket's Whisper. In a quiet village surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills, young Clara held her breath upon receiving her grandmother's most cherished possession. A delicate silver locket, adorned with intricate filigree and set with a small, deep green stone that glimmered like emeralds. It was a family heirloom, she was told, passed down through generations. Clara's grandmother looked at her with piercing blue eyes filled with a mix of pride and concern. "Be careful with it, my dear," she had said, her voice wavering ever so slightly. "It deserves a worthy heart." Clara clasped the locket around her neck, its cool metal resting against her skin. She felt an inexplicable connection to the heirloom, but as time passed, the warmth of the locket turned to a chill that echoed through her very soul. On the night of the full moon, Clara lay awake, tossing and turning as shadows danced across her bedroom walls. A soft murmur broke through the silence, a whisper just beyond the threshold of her consciousness. At first, she thought it was a figment of her imagination, but as the nights grew longer and the locket hung heavier upon her chest, the whispers became clearer. "Free me, Clara," it beckoned, the voice smooth and alluring. "I can grant you more than you can imagine." Setting her heart on the promise, Clara closed her eyes, envisioning all she wanted: friends who adored her, the perfect grades, the admiration of the village. But the joy was short-lived. With every wish she made, something dark unfurled within her. Her laughter turned brittle, her once kind heart began to thump with an unfamiliar yearning, and the desires of the spirit morphed into sinister demands. "Take what you want," it urged. "Let nothing stand in your way." As the days passed, Clara found herself drawn to the darker corners of her desires. At school, her friends began to turn uneasy, whispering behind her back, concerned by her sudden shift. She found herself ensnared in a web of petty deceit. She sabotaged others to gain the glory she craved until she became the outcast, the very thing she had feared. In the mirror, Clara barely recognized herself anymore. The spirited girl she once was faded with each passing day, trapped beneath layers of malice. Yet, somehow, the locket appeared untouched, brilliant and mesmerizing. Then, one stormy night, as thunder rolled in waves and lightning cracked the sky, the whispers became screams. "I cannot remain trapped," the spirit bellowed with a fury that shook the very fabric of Claris' world. "You must obey, help me, and I shall make you powerful beyond measure." Panic surged through her. She yanked the locket from her neck, pressing it against her palm like a talisman. "Get out of me!" she screamed, but the spirit only laughed, a sound like broken glass. "No, Clara. I am you now. I have given you a taste of what true power feels like. You crave it, just as I do." Desperate to harness her sense of self, Clara sought guidance from the village's wise woman, an elder known for understanding the spirits that lingered. Old and frail Marie lived on the edge of the woods, a sanctuary for other lost souls. As Clara explained her plight, Marie's expression darkened. "You have invited darkness into your heart, my dear," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "That locket holds a spirit trapped long ago, one fueled by resentment and longing. Should you fail to break its hold, it will consume you entirely." Determined, Clara returned home that night, heart racing, locket clutched tightly in hand. The spirit howled within her, a tempest of anger and despair. "You will never be free. You are mine." With tears streaming down her face, Clara forged ahead. She recalled moments of love, laughter, and kindness, her grandmother's warm embrace, a friend's reassuring smile. Each memory was a shard of light against the growing shadows. "Leave me," she cried out to the darkness, clutching the locket even tighter. "You are nothing without my heart." The locket shook violently in her grip as bright tendrils of light exploded from her memories, colliding with the suffocating darkness. She felt the spirit claw at her from within, but Clara stood her ground, recalling the warmth of her family and the bonds of friendship. With one final surge of strength, Clara hurled the locket across the room, shattering it against the stone wall. The emerald glimmered in the moonlight, its encompassing light dazzling, bright and overwhelming. A scream erupted, echoing around her as the spirit wailed and twisted, its presence disintegrating into wisps of shadow that danced for a fleeting moment before evaporating completely. Gasping, Clara returned to the wreckage. Where the locket had been, only dust remained, and a haunting silence filled the room. She felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted, the sinister voice now a mere memory rather than a torment. In time, Clara learned to navigate this new landscape of emotions, rediscovering joy and connection with those around her. The darkness had been vanquished, but the lessons lingered. From that day on, she wore a trinket of her own making, a simple bead that held no power but served as a safeguard against the whispers of greed. The locket was gone, but her heart, resilient and kind, was free once more. Let's get to another story, The Wishing Well. Ella lived in a small town where whispers of ancient tales and legends lingered like the sweet scent of wildflowers. Amongst these stories, the tale of the old well at the edge of the woods was the most notorious. It was said that if you tossed a coin into its depths and made a wish, that wish would come true, but at a price. Ella had always been skeptical, dismissing the lore as the stuff of children's games and late-night stories meant to frighten young ones. But teenage life can be lonely, filled with moments of doubt and a yearning for more. At 16, Ella felt the weight of her unfulfilled dreams pressing on her heart. One evening, after yet another day marred by the taunts of her classmates and the invisible chains of expectations placed upon her by family and society, she found herself at the well, unable to resist the tantalizing pull of the legend. "Why not?" she murmured to herself, the moonlight casting a silvery halo on the well's mossy stones. Ella fished a tarnished quarter from her pocket, its edges smoothed by years of neglect. Much like her own spirit. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes and whispered her wish. "I wish to be beautiful, confident, and loved." She tossed the coin into the well with a splash, the rippling water sending shimmers of light dancing across her face. A chill ran down her spine as the tranquil night deepened. For a moment, she felt something shift in the air, a sense of anticipation and foreboding that prickled her skin. She brushed it off, giggling at her own fear, and walked home, a newfound lightness in her step. The next morning, Ella woke to find her wish had indeed come true. Her reflection in the mirror revealed a breathtakingly beautiful girl, with radiant skin, flowing hair that caught the light, and a smile that seemed both alluring and enchanting. It was astonishing, Friends who had once considered her invisible were suddenly flocking to her, complimenting her, and asking her to hang out. A popular guy named Daniel, who had bypassed her for years, was now texting her, his messages sparking hope in her heart. But as the days went by, Ella began to notice cracks in her perfect new life. With beauty came jealousy. Her friends shifted subtly, and whispers of envy and spite echoed in hallways. The girls who had once been her confidants now exchanged glances that felt sharp and piercing. She couldn't escape it, the feeling that she was no longer truly part of her world. That she was merely an object of attention, a possession of admiration. And then came the darkness. Ella found herself haunted by a strange sense of isolation. The more she grasped for friendship, the more it slipped away. The allure of her beauty twisted the admiration of others into something possessive and unhealthy. Daniel, who had seemed like a dream, began demanding more of her, more attention, more time, more of everything. Slowly, Ella felt herself morphing into a shadow of who she once was. The very confidence she craved became a source of stress rather than empowerment. One evening, feeling suffocated by the glittering cage of her new life, she returned to the well, her heart heavy with regret. Standing before it, she could feel the weight of her decisions pressing down like a storm cloud. "I want to go back," she cried, her voice wavering amidst her tears. "I want to be me again, just me." The water appeared disturbingly still, yet the darkness below seemed to stir. Every fiber of her being felt the price of her wish. She was too far gone, too altered. A desperate plea echoed in her mind. She realized that it wasn't just beauty she had lost. It was her authenticity, her real friendships, her joy. With a final sob, she tossed another coin into the well, her heart racing. "Please, undo my wish. I'll do anything." Ella stared into the abyss, her eyes pleading. Moments turned to an eternity, and just as despair threatened to swallow her whole, a soft whisper drifted from the depths of the well, barely audible but palpable. "What you seek lies in the truth of your heart." In that harrowing moment, Ella understood. The beauty she had wished for was superficial. True beauty thrived in vulnerability and authenticity. The next day, she returned to school with no makeup, her hair scraped into a simple ponytail. When peers glanced her way, it was not out of awe, but confusion. And ironically, that was when she felt lighter than ever. Friendships formed anew, built on honesty rather than illusion. She spoke her truth and showed her flaws, and slowly, walls began to crumble among the girls who had once envied her. As for Daniel, she respectfully ended things, choosing to embrace the space it created for self-discovery. Years later, Ella still returned to the old well, not to wish, but to reflect. She would toss in a coin, listening to its gentle plop, and whisper her gratitude for the lessons learned born from the darkness of desire. The true magic, she realized, wasn't in wishes granted but in the power to embrace oneself, imperfections and all. That was the most beautiful wish of all. Let's get to another story: Whispers of the Forgotten. In the heart of the sprawling metropolis of Eldergrove, where glass skyscrapers gleamed under the city lights and modern life throbbed with unyielding pace, Dr. Celia Harper, a passionate historian, found herself at a crossroads. She had dedicated her life to uncovering the stories of those who had come before. Yet, despite her insatiable curiosity and countless excavations, something crucial felt lost to her: an unseen tapestry beneath the city's concrete veins. One fateful evening, while sifting through dusty archives in the basement of the Eldergrove City Library, Celia stumbled upon an ancient map. Its edges were frayed, and the ink had faded, but there was an unmistakable outline. City blocks now bustling with life lined along a curiously unmarked area. Tentatively, she traced her fingers over the drawing. This section seemed to indicate the presence of a graveyard, swallowed whole by urban development. Excitement fluttered in her chest as she set out to unveil this potential historical treasure. The following weeks were filled with tireless digging, both in books and the city's soil. With permission from the local authorities, Celia gathered a small excavation team to probe the area. After several days of hard labor, they struck gold, or rather, they struck bones. As shovels scraped against fragile, weathered coffins, a chill coursed through the air. Misgivings hung like fog as they unearthed the remains of the forgotten. A small graveyard buried under decades of asphalt and architecture. Names etched on decaying tombstones were obscured, but a palpable energy surrounded the hallowed ground, an echo of countless lives. As dark clouds gathered above, Celia and her team worked hurriedly, their nostalgia blossoming into dread. They had uncovered more than just skeletal remains. They had disturbed a peace carefully maintained in the silence of the ages. That very night, strange phenomena began. As Celia lay in a hotel room, the winds howled like long-lost voices, seeping through the walls. The flickering lamps cast shadows that danced restlessly, as if urging her to listen. A pull deep within her urged her back to the graveyard. Perhaps it was the spirits trapped between worlds who demanded to tell their stories. Reluctant but compelled, Celia ventured into the night. Guided by an ethereal glow emanating from the disturbed earth, she arrived at the unmarked site. The air crackled with static, thick with anticipation. To her astonishment, she witnessed a gathering, a spectral assembly of the departed rising from their graves, their forms translucent yet defined, like apparitions in a dream. Fury painted their faces, ignited by years of silence, while sorrow pooled in their eyes. They did not merely seek the resuscitation of their stories. They demanded acknowledgement of the injustices they had suffered, and it was not just reclaiming the narrative, it was revenge. Celia, paralyzed by both fear and grief, held her breath as the spirits began to speak, their voices echoing like wind through the trees. Tales of betrayal and neglect spilled forth. Each spirit recounted how they had met their undeserved fates: landowners swindled, laborers crushed, innocent souls lost to jealousy and greed. The weight of their resentment was palpable. A chill gripped her heart as she realized that they were awakening not for want of remembrance but to take action against those whose ignorance had quelled their stories for too long. They sought retribution against the living who thrived atop their neglected graves. Celia felt the burning need to advocate for these lost souls and knew she had to intervene. "I will tell your stories," she promised, her voice trembling but resolute. For a moment, silence enveloped the air, and then the whispers crescendoed into a tumult of sound. The spirits drew closer, their fury tempered slightly by her vow. But it would not be enough. They needed reparation, and they intended to make her and her team offer it in the only way they knew how: by confronting those in power in the city, the very architects of their erasure. Celia returned to her team, her heart heavy with their burden, and gathered her courage to face the living. They created workshops, gatherings, and art installations, dedicated to reclaiming the stories of the forgotten souls beneath Eldergrove. They lobbied for financial support to preserve the site and educate the public. The tales that had been buried alongside the dead now streamed forth through literature, exhibitions, and community events. At every presentation, Celia could feel the spirits by her side. As their stories took flight within the hearts of residents, their rage ebbed into something more profound: recognition and respect. As time unraveled, the graveyard became a sacred space, no longer hidden but celebrated, and the spirits merged with the city's heartbeat, their tales transforming into a resilient thread woven into the metropolis's identity. The vengeance of the buried had subsided, nurtured by a blossoming justice fueled by the living's awareness and compassion. Celia Harper realized that history could be haunting, but so too could it be healing. And in the depths of Eldergrove's past, amid the whispers of the forgotten, the city found a way to embrace its soul. Let's get to another story: the Phantom Hitchhiker. The setting sun cast long shadows over the winding country road as Ethan, a weary cab driver, maneuvered his vehicle through the desolate landscape. With each passing mile, the silence enveloped him like a heavy blanket, saving his thoughts for moments when boredom might strike. Patrons were rare on this stretch, particularly at dusk when everyone else was dodging the unexpected drop in temperature. He was just about to enter the next small town when he spotted a figure standing at the edge of the road. It was a woman in a tattered white dress, her hair flowing like a ghostly veil in the evening breeze. He slowed down, hesitating for a moment before rolling down his window. "Need a ride?" he called out, the words echoing against the stillness of the approaching night. She nodded, her movements jerky but deliberate, as if she were maneuvering through a bizarre dream. Ethan felt a shiver of anxiety but quickly shrugged it off. He opened the door for her, and she slipped into the backseat. "Where to?" he asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "Just drive," she replied softly, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's instincts screamed. Something about her was off. He pulled away, the engine's growl breaking the silence that had settled like a thick fog. The air grew colder, and he could see his breath fogging up the windshield. "So, what's your name?" He tried to keep the conversation flowing, his mind darting to the fact that this was a very unusual fare. "Marianne," she said, her gaze fixed out the window. "You don't remember me, do you?" He glanced at her again, furrowing his brow. She seemed familiar yet distant, her features ethereal and clouded. Should I? You will. Soon. Confusion swirled within him, but he kept his focus on the road. They drove in silence for a while, with only the sound of tires crunching over gravel and the occasional rustle of the wind echoing in the night air. Do you hear them? She finally asked, her voice trembling. Who? The whispers. They need to be heard. Something stirred deep within Ethan, a memory tugging at the edges of his mind like a moth seeking warmth from flames. He stole a glance back at her, his heart quickening as flashes of fragmented photographs rushed into view. A newspaper article about a tragic car accident. A name, similar to hers, that had haunted the small-town memory for years. Marianne Caldwell? He murmured, realization hitting him like a bolt of lightning. Yes, she replied, her voice heavy with desperation. They didn't know. They still don't. I have to make them see. See what? He pressed, daring to drive off course in an attempt to keep her talking, to understand. The truth. Her eyes were wide, pleading. I was innocent. They think I caused it, that it was my fault, but it wasn't. Memories flooded back. Marianne Caldwell, the young woman who had died in a tragic accident 5 years ago, her story consumed in flames and blame. There had been whispers, accusations, a cloud of suspicion hanging over her as if she were a scapegoat for a tragedy that collectively buried small-town secrets. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his palms sweating. You want me to tell them? Please. She cried, the urgency in her voice pushing through the silence like a knife slicing through tension. There's something they must know. The truth lies buried near the old quarry where I died. They need to find it. Steeling himself against the emotions threatening to erupt, Ethan found himself nodding. I'll help you. Thank you, she said, her voice barely a whisper again, almost too soft to hear over the rushing wind outside. But as they approached the familiar bend that led to the quarry, her presence began to wane, like smoke dissipating into the air. Ethan could feel the pulse of that urgency slipping further from him, like dreams fading upon waking. Marianne? He called back, panic rising in his chest. Where? But she was gone, leaving behind only the chill that lingered in the air. The cab continued onward, neared the quarry's entrance, and Ethan stopped, staring blankly ahead. With trembling hands, he pulled out his phone and dialed the local police station. After the order of events was disclosed, he finally got out of the cab and walked to the edge of the quarry. Minutes turned to hours as the police arrived, skeptical but intrigued by Ethan's sudden claim. They began excavating the site, and as the night deepened, it became evident that Marianne's spirit would not rest until the truth was unearthed. Hours later, cries rang out in the night as they pulled a rusted car from the bottom of the quarry, proof of a darker truth that had been hidden away. Ethan watched, breathless, as Marianne's name echoed through the air. He waited, heart pounding, for that chilling whisper to return. Finally, he felt a brief, warm breath of relief in the air, a fleeting moment of closure. The burden of the dead had been lifted, a message finally delivered, and Ethan understood. Sometimes in the darkest of places, the voices of the past needed to be heard. Let's get to another story. Threads of Shadows. Elena Thorne had always considered her home a sanctuary, nestled in the shadow of the ancient oak trees that stood sentinel around it. The old Victorian house had been in her family for generations, a place where laughter echoed through the halls and memories clung to the wallpaper like autumn leaves. But ever since she inherited an intricately woven tapestry from her late grandmother, the warmth of her sanctuary had begun to fray at the edges. The tapestry depicted a swirling landscape, vibrant hues contrasting starkly with dark figures lurking in the corners. It had always hung in her grandmother's sitting room, shrouded in an aura of mystery and whispered with a warning. There are stories woven within that can change a life. Elena had dismissed it as a mere superstition, until inexplicable events began to unfold. It started as a whisper, low and indistinct, one she could almost convince herself was simply the wind slipping through the cracks. But the longer she stared at the tapestry, the clearer the words became. They were murmurings of the past, urgent and laden with despair. Occasionally, she could have sworn she saw the figures within the threads move, shifting in and out of view like specters of despair. Late one night, overcome with an unexplainable compulsion, she approached the tapestry. Her fingers grazed the intricate weaving, tracing the curves of the figures entwined in a dance she did not understand. As her fingertips brushed each thread, a coldness engulfed her, wrapping around her like a shroud. That night, Elena dreamt of a woman, pale and ghostly, standing in a field of shadows, her eyes filled with an unquenchable sorrow. The woman reached out towards her, before fading into the darkness, leaving only a lingering sense of dread behind. The days turned into weeks, and the tapestry refused to relinquish its hold on her. Elena found herself drawn to it irresistibly, even as the unsettling sensations intensified. She noticed details she had never seen before. Symbols woven among the threads, glimmers of light crossing dark paths, a hidden story yearning to be uncovered. Each night, when she returned home from work, the atmosphere felt charged, as if the very walls whispered secrets. One evening, while preparing dinner, Elena heard a soft thud from the sitting room. Her heart raced as she approached the source of the sound, only to find a single thread from the tapestry lying on the floor, detached and frayed. An icy dread slithered through her, igniting the remnants of a suppressed fear. It was then that her grandmother's warning replayed in her mind. Desperate for clarity, Elena reached for the only thing she could think of, her grandmother's journal. She had found it tucked away in a dusty corner of the attic, filled with entries that danced between reality and the surreal. The pages revealed an unsettling family history of loss and sorrow, a legacy that echoed through time. The tapestry, it turned out, was not merely decorative, it had been a binding spell, a means of trapping the unwanted memories and shadows of their ancestors, the dark legacy woven through generations. Elena stumbled upon the final entry, penned in a hurried, trembling script. "Beware the tapestry. It ties us to our past. It holds our pain." If one thread unravels, brow furrowed, she realized the implication. Each thread represented a soul, a fragment of family history, and its loosening signaled the release of a damning truth that had been buried deep. In the days that followed, the disturbances grew bolder. Objects shifted on their own, chilling drafts filled her home, and the figure from her dreams began to slip between the real world and her consciousness more frequently, begging for release. Sleep deprived and trembling, Elena resolved to confront her family's past. She opened her door, inviting daylight in, hoping the sun's warmth would banish the shadows. By piecing together her grandmother's words and the history they contained, Elena uncovered the story of a great aunt who had vanished under mysterious circumstances, believed to be consumed by the dark void of the tapestry's curse. The threads, she learned, were a grip on her ancestors' anguish, and she could either let them unravel or confront the shadows they held. With newfound determination, she returned to the tapestry, hands trembling as she began to cut the threads one by one. Each snip echoed with an ancient scream, unraveling forgotten truths and pulling the darkness into the light. The figure from her dreams appeared as she severed the final thread, a mix of sorrow and relief washing over its ethereal face. For a moment, they were connected, the tapestry showing her visions of past betrayals, lost loves, and a locked room in the family estate filled with unseen horrors. In that moment, Elena understood. These threads were not merely bindings, they were the family's pain speaking through her, demanding recognition and healing. When the final thread fell away, the room filled with a warm, glowing light, illuminating each corner as the last remnants of the curse dissipated into the air. Elena stood before the clean wall, the beautiful tapestry now a memory rather than a prisoner. She had embraced the darkness and emerged into the light, each thread of her lineage woven into her own understanding, reminding her that the past could not be forgotten, but it could be understood. Her sanity restored, she smiled softly, ready to weave a new narrative, one of healing and hope, unbound by the shadows of her ancestors. Thank you for watching and subscribe for more horror stories.